Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, John and Lee proudly present the greatest wrestling show ever!
Okay, guys, welcome to episode 8 of the greatest wrestling show ever with myself, John, and Lee. Evening, Lee.
Good evening, John. How are you?
Yeah, man, good. Right, so we're going to get straight into it because this is a long match. So we're going to basically press play pretty much straight away. If anyone does want to watch this on the network later on, we are including the chapter before the match itself, which covers the backstory. It's only an extra 3 minutes, and it's already quite a lengthy one anyway. So that chapter starts 1 hour, 48 minutes, 17 seconds into the pay-per-view as a whole. It's WrestleMania 25 from 2009. 1 hour, 48 minutes, 17 seconds, going in 3, 2, 1, off we go. So, showing the backstory here. Right, so originally this storyline started with, I've got the Wikipedia up in front of me. No Way Out, Shawn Michaels defeated John Bradshaw Layfield, JBL, in a match with the added stipulation that if JBL had won, he would become the owner of Michaels' name and likeness. So this bit they're showing here is basically Shawn's owned by JBL. On the February the 16th episode of Raw, Michaels challenged JBL to another match, with the winner advancing to WrestleMania to challenge The Undertaker to attempt to end his undefeated streak. The next week on Raw, Michaels defeated JBL, but it was later announced another competitor would stand in his way to prevent him from advancing to the show in the form of Vladimir Kozlov. Have you ever seen Vladimir Kozlov before?
No, I haven't.
You've not really missed out on much. He is... I think he's an Eastern European, but I think he was presented as being Russian, if I remember correctly. Had a good look on him. Not a particularly great worker. Yeah, believe it or not, he pinned The Undertaker clean once. I think it was on an episode of SmackDown in an attempt to get him over. One of the very few men that have ever defeated The Undertaker clean.
Wow.
So Kozlov also made a challenge to The Undertaker. The two wrestled the next week on Raw, with Michaels defeating Kozlov and earning his match with The Undertaker. The next week on Raw, Undertaker and Michaels defeated Kozlov and JBL in a tag match. After the match, Michaels attacked Undertaker. The pair played mind games with each other over the following weeks.
So Michaels and Taker teamed up, did you say?
No, that one there was...
No, the match you just mentioned.
Undertaker, oh, you're right, sorry, yeah, apologies. Undertaker and Michaels teamed together to defeat Kozlov and JBL. The only thing Kozlov ever did that was any good was a couple of years after this, he formed a comedy tag team with Santino Marella, which was vaguely amusing.
Yeah.
We've just shown there Shawn giving The Undertaker the super kick on the stage, looking all angry. I sometimes think Shawn, like when he's trying to do an angry face, he looks like he's asleep. I don't know if that was... It's supposed to be like showing all, I don't know, like conflicted and emotional, but he just looked snoozy to me all the time. And that's me being a big Shawn Michaels fan. When I was a teenager, Shawn Michaels was my favourite wrestler, so I'm not putting him down. It was particularly after he came back in 2002. He got a bit of a snoozy face on occasionally.
Yeah, no, I was always a big Shawn Michaels fan.
Are you aware of him having a 4.5 year, but what was supposed to be a retirement, but then came back from? Do you know about that?
Yeah, I'm aware that he was away for a few years. I don't know the full story behind it. Was it injury related?
Well, funnily enough, it was a mixture of things. The injury, coincidentally, occurred in a match against The Undertaker. In the 1998 Royal Rumble, Shawn defended his world title against The Undertaker in a casket match. And he received a backdrop over the ropes where he landed back first on the casket. And it didn't actually look all that bad, to be honest. He kind of caught the corner of it, but was continuing to roll and landed on his feet on the floor. I mean, it didn't look nice, but it didn't look particularly bad, and he carried on and finished the match.
Yeah.
But then he obviously developed severe pain afterwards. He missed the following month's No Way Out. I think it was 4-on-4, 8-man tag match main event. He did the honours, so to speak, for Steve Austin, giving him his first world title reign at that WrestleMania, and then was gone for 4.5 years.
Wow.
I think most people at the time thought he'd never come back, but he returned in time for SummerSlam 2002 to face Triple H.
So was that 4 years spent trying to get back?
I think he'd considered it a couple of times. That started storylines on TV with a view to him coming back. They never quite worked out. He'd got a fairly major drug problem at the time as well. So he, I think a few times when he might have liked to have come back, they decided it wasn't the best thing for him and what have you.
Yeah. And then he found Jesus at some point, didn't he?
Showing Shawn's entrance here, so he's coming in from the rafters, a little bit like a young Jesus Christ there. He's a born-again Christian, Shawn Michaels, when he came back in 2002, having been, by all accounts, a bit of a prick for the majority of his main event run, particularly. He came back born again, a new man.
Yeah, yeah. I just mentioned that when he came back, he'd found Jesus, as they say.
Now,
two absolute legends here.
One question I've got for you, you might have noticed the giant sign there above Shawn as he was coming down on this platform. It says the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania. Would you describe WrestleMania 25 as the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania?
Yeah, it's kind of obvious.
Yeah, it's WrestleMania 26 is the 25th anniversary, isn't it?
Oh, of course. Yeah, see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's the 24th
WrestleMania 1 isn't the first anniversary, is it?
Yeah, because WrestleMania 1 is in year 0 in essence. 25 years later would be WrestleMania 26.
Good point. So do you know that Shawn wrote his own theme tune?
I did not know that, no.
Yeah,
I know obviously he sings it. I didn't know he wrote it.
Yeah, him and Jimmy Hart came up with it and then later decided he also wanted to sing it.
Right, okay. That's news to me. Do you know who came up with the nickname Heartbreak Kid?
No.
Mr. Perfect.
He came over it for Shawn Michaels.
For Shawn, yeah. Suggested it for him, yeah. I thought it was a good fit.
Brilliant. Perfect, yeah. Perfect.
So having come down on that platform from heaven or what have you, Shawn's now back in his traditional Shawn Michaels music. And I'll tell you what, do you know who sang the music first, before Shawn did?
Well, it was Sherry, wasn't it?
It was Sherry, yeah. The original version of it was Sherry singing it. And I don't know when that change came, because she managed in what, 92, 93-ish?
Yeah, because she wasn't with him all that long, was she? She was put with him to kind of do something with her. But I think ultimately he decided that she wasn't a great fit.
I remember managing him at WrestleMania 9 when he wrestled against Tatanka. By 1994, she was in WCW when Hogan and Co. went there. I think she was involved in the Bash to the Beach in 94. And went on to manage Harlem Heat, etc. Sadly died, I think it was the same weekend as Chris Benoit, I think. Sherry Martel died, same weekend.
Wow.
So it didn't, as far as I know, Chris Benoit didn't do it. Yes, I think her death unfortunately didn't get the press that it might have done otherwise.
No, overshadowed, yeah. She was good, she was. She was a really good character.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Really good on the mic. The whole Warrior Savage feud that went on, I thought she was brilliant throughout that.
So Shawn's down now in the ring awaiting the presence of the Undertaker. So WrestleMania 25 there, that's a big crowd, that is. I wonder how many people are there. It was April the 5th, 2009 at the Reliance Stadium in Houston, Texas. 72,744 people. It's the 8th largest attendance in WrestleMania history.
Wow.
The event pumped an estimated 49.8 million into the local economy and generated 5.7 million in local tax revenue, equivalent to 600 full-time jobs for the area.
Fantastic.
That's amazing.
So what's this then? This will be Taker's 18th WrestleMania?
No, so it's his 17th, because if you notice there, some of the signs held up saying 16-1. So he's going into this match is 16-0, as the Americans call it. Oh, that's quite cool, isn't it? Rising out of the ground like that. That's a classic shot. No, so 16-0 going into it. This is his 17th one. It was only a couple of years before where they really started actually making a big deal about the streak. If I remember correctly, Randy Orton in 2005, I think it was one of the first ones to really make a deal out of there being a streak which he intended to break. Prior to that, it was known that the Undertaker hadn't lost at WrestleMania, but it was generally not so much pushed as a feature. Okay, guys, right, we've mainly lost internet connection there with each other, but we've carried on watching, so we're currently at 1:58 and 40 seconds now. So Undertaker's making his way down to the ring.
Yeah, thankfully he's never in a rush.
Oh, we've got plenty of time, haven't we?
So do you remember Taker's debut then?
I do. It's coming up for 30 years ago, isn't it? In a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Didn't see it at the time because I don't think I was even aware of WWF at the time. But it was Survivor Series 1990. You'd had Sky earlier that year. Did you watch the pay-per-view? The next day after school?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. No, actually, I think pay-per-views. My mum used to let me stay up.
Ooh, when you were 10.
So I'd watch some Sky movies middle of the night. It was a Survivor Series, so it was on a Thursday into a Friday. But yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday. The big build-up at the time was obviously who was Ted DiBiase's mystery guest going to be.
Yeah.
And I remember I was convinced it was either going to be Virgil.
That would have disappointed him, but yeah.
Or, because they were fighting Dusty Rhodes, and I thought it was going to be, remember Sweet Sapphire?
I thought you were about to say Sapphire, yeah. Would it have been Virgil as he was, or Virgil under the Undertaker gimmick?
Yeah. And do you know what the original plan was for Undertaker?
So the gobbledygooker, the egg, is that right?
Yeah, coming out of the egg as the gobbledygook, yeah. Gobbledygooker.
I think I've heard that. I'm not entirely sure that's true, but I've heard that before.
Oh, don't ruin it.
That would have been a shorter-lived career, I think, than... It's amazing, 30 years later. I remember 15 years ago, my dad seeing that I was watching it and going, is Undertaker still going, is he? He's an old man by now, isn't he? And that was 15 years ago, maybe even more like 20, to be honest.
No, it's incredible.
It's I suppose you perhaps didn't realise how young he was when he became the Undertaker. So I think he's about 55 now, which would have meant he was 25.
And he looked a lot older.
He definitely looked a lot older.
Yeah.
So when he defeated Hogan for the world title at Survivor Series 91, he must have been about 26, which is fairly young to be world champion. Randy Orton's the youngest ever WWF champion at 24. Lesnar was 25. I think The Rock might have been 26 as well. I think Yokozuna was about 26, but there's not been many.
So the Taker victory in 91 was out, and then he lost it. Did he drop it again a few days later?
Yeah, this Tuesday in Texas pay-per-view. So he won it dodgily with interference from Ric Flair. I think he gave Hogan a tombstone onto the steel chair that Flair had slid into the ring. And then Jack Tunney said there needed to be a rematch. Conveniently, there's a pay-per-view lined up a few days later. That's a bonus. Otherwise, that's behind closed doors, and that would have been rubbish. And Flair interfered again, and the title was held up afterwards to be given to the winner of the 1992 Rumble, which was, of course, Flair himself.
So that'll have been to build up the feud that never happened, won't it? Hogan and Flair, the one that everyone wanted.
Exactly, yeah. Get the title off Hogan without him looking bad. Give the Undertaker a bit of a rub or what have you, and set up for Flair to win the title at the Rumble.
Yeah, it used to be really exciting when Jack Tunney used to appear on screen. And knew something big was going down.
You know Jack Tunney's story? Do you know where he's from?
No.
He ran a promotion in Canada, and when they were in the midst of their international expansion in the sort of early to mid 80s, and they brought out a lot of territories, Jack Tunney's Canadian territory, whichever part of Canada it was one of them. So he was brought on board and given an office job, and also made the fictional president of the company for storyline purposes. Just looking here, actually, speaking of the aforementioned 1992 Rumble, that was only the second time ever that Shawn and The Undertaker had been in the same match. Don't know if they interacted at all in there. They may have not been in at the same time. But the first time they were in the same match was the previous year, October the 3rd, only a few months before. They were both in a 20-man battle royal with a British Bulldog won at the Royal Albert Hall. Then Royal Rumble 92, they're in the same match. The first time they faced off kind of properly was Mankind and Undertaker defeated Triple H, or he was called Hunter Hearst Helmsley still, and Shawn Michaels on Raw in August 97 as part of the build-up to their match at the Ground Zero pay-per-view in September. So that's the first time they had a singles match, September 1997. It'd taken a long time apparently for Michaels to convince Vince McMahon that putting them together in a singles match was a good idea. I think Vince thought the size difference wouldn't work. They then had their particularly famous match. So the match at Ground Zero in '97 in September was a good match, but ended in a no contest. I think they just kept getting pulled apart and brawling. I seem to remember Taker doing a tope over the outside onto a large group of other wrestlers. But they set up then the classic cage match, the first ever Hell in a Cell match at the October Bad Blood pay-per-view. So one of the best matches ever. Also, debut of Kane that night. Have you seen that, presumably?
Yes, recently actually. That was part of Harry and my top 30 matches of all time.
Great match, that. Great match.
And I think when I mentioned it to you, you suggested that you'd have put this one away watching now ahead of it.
Quite possibly, yeah. This was a good match. This is the only ever pay-per-view I've ever paid for. So when I was watching wrestling in the mid to late 90s, pay-per-views were just on Sky. Whenever they went on to pay-per-view in the wherever it was, mid-noughties, I was kind of paying attention, but not that bothered. But I was really keen to see this match. So I paid for the pay-per-view. I remember watching it. At that point, I lived with my first wife and baby Ollie in a converted barn thing next door to my in-laws. I remember watching it there. And it's one of the very few times where I've allowed myself to suspend my disbelief. So obviously I know it's a work. By that point, I'd probably wrestled myself 250 times. I was fully aware how it all worked. But rather than watching it like I normally do and thinking, oh, that's a nice spot. I like the way they worked into that. That was nicely done. I remember watching it and going, oh, Jesus, he kicked out the tombstone. Oh, it's chokeslam.
Yeah.
Proper caught up in it.
I've often wondered how excited wrestlers can get about watching wrestling.
I still enjoy it. I think, well, it is. It's
I
hard
know
to...
obviously it's all work, but I thoroughly enjoy it. I just wonder what kind of mindset wrestlers have when they're watching. Are they kind of judging what they're doing or predicting what's coming next?
I try and let myself just enjoy it, to be honest. And it's hard to know how I would feel about it and watch it if I'd never wrestled, because obviously not being a wrestler is nearly 18 years ago, if you know what I mean. So it's hard to remember how I particularly felt about it then. I generally try and not overanalyze it, just enjoy it or not.
Yeah.
I generally try and forget that it's a work. Like, you obviously know it is when you really stop and think about it. And I do like matches that allow yourself to do that. Ones I find certain, like, for example, some of John Cena's stuff, just some of the things he does, there's so much obvious feeding into things or not pressure being put on certain moves, and it just reminds you that it's a work.
Yeah, like, especially when, for example, they miss a move, but then you see them line up again to try it again.
Yeah, stuff like, even like, for example, not to pick on Cena, I think Cena's a fantastic wrestler, but to give a couple of examples of his, he'd do those shoulder blocks where the opponent would always feed up in the same way. They'd take a couple of them, they'd swing, he'd duck, he'd give him the old Blue Thunder bomb and all that sort of stuff. Just saying, and Triple H has a few things like that as well. They very much require an opponent to do stuff that they don't normally do.
Yeah.
And again, it's fine. It's not like I have a massive problem with it, but it just doesn't allow me to get pulled into the match in the same way. Whereas something like this, yeah, sure, it's clearly at work, but it does look somewhat real.
Yeah. No, it's funny because Harry and I quite often have a conversation. Harry knows that I don't like any finishing move that requires the recipient of the move to be in a certain place or a certain position for it to happen. I like the finishes that can happen anytime, anywhere. So, for example, Seth Rollins' stomp requires them to be sort of stood in the middle of the ring, kind of doubled over. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to, say, the RKO where it can, well, out of nowhere.
Literally. Have you ever seen the Canadian Destroyer?
Is that a move or a wrestler?
It's a move. So Rey Mysterio actually does it now. Rey Mysterio does it fairly well. It's the one where it's essentially a somersault pile driver. So he does it a bit more like a sunset flip. So he runs into them, and as he sunset flips them, he grabs their head between his legs and flips over into a pile driver. His looks semi-realistic. It was originally created by a Canadian wrestler called P.T. Williams, who was in TNA for a number of years. And his version of it very much involved the wrestler he was giving it to doing a backflip whilst he was in the pile driver position. What's his name in Adam Cole in NXT does it as well. He does the Panama Sunrise. I don't know if you've seen that. He jumps off the second rope, and even though he's going downwards, him going downwards causes an upwards flip.
Yeah.
I don't quite get the mechanics of that. Surely when you jump onto someone's head, they go head first into the mat.
Yeah.
Backflip.
Yeah.
So Michaels has actually got Undertaker in a crossface there. It surprised me when Michaels used the crossface, because we mentioned Chris Benoit only a few minutes ago. The crossface was Chris Benoit's finisher. And after obviously he murdered his wife and child and then killed himself, I was surprised that they ever brought this move back. I thought along with him, it would have been consigned to history.
Yeah.
So I mentioned before, the second proper match that Michaels and Undertaker had was that Bad Blood Hell in a Cell match. Same day Brian Pillman died, if you didn't know that. He was found dead in his hotel room on the day of the Bad Blood pay-per-view.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that, yeah.
They announced it during the show, and I think most people thought it was a storyline to start with, because he'd been scheduled to face, I think it was Goldust, with Marlena, who was Goldust's real-life wife, on the line. I think everyone watching expected that Brian was going to run out and attack a grieving Goldust until they realised actually no, he actually had been found dead.
Right.
But the third match they had was that aforementioned title match at the Royal Rumble, the casket match. And then you fast forward in 5 years until they've got any interaction. It's Royal Rumble 2003. Then nothing again for 4 years. Royal Rumble 2007, where they actually finished the match. So Taker won it, last eliminating Michaels. We had a fairly lengthy, if I remember correctly, about 7-minute section, essentially a mini match, the two of them at the end of the Rumble, which was to, I think, gauge interest in and perhaps tease to somewhat a degree future matches between them.
Yeah. Never a fan of casket matches.
No. Yeah, there's a limited excitement, I think, to be had by repeatedly seeing two men trying to stuff each other into a wooden box.
So Undertaker's had 8 names before the Undertaker. Sorry, Undertaker's the 8th. Do you reckon you can name the previous 7?
Right, Mean Mark Callis.
Yeah, 1.
Texas Red.
2.
The Punisher.
3.
Right. Just Mean Mark, or is that the same one?
Mean Mark Callis, yeah.
Yeah.
How did you say that?
I'm struggling now.
So you've got the ones you haven't said then, the Master of Pain.
Yep, knew that, yeah.
Punisher Dice Morgan.
Yep, rings a bell.
And Kane the Undertaker.
Kane the Undertaker, yeah. So he was announced as the Undertaker at Survivor Series, but hadn't he already... Was it he'd already made a couple of appearances, or the first couple of appearances he made after Survivor Series is referred to as Kane the Undertaker?
Yeah, he was. I think it was a couple after. Yeah. And then there was a particular reason why they dropped it.
Because it was his little brother's name.
Oh, yes, that was it.
Right. Yeah. And to be honest, it sounds better than Mark the Undertaker, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Famously managed by Brother Love when he debuted, and for the first handful of weeks, which to me never fitted in the slightest. Undertaker and Brother Love.
It didn't make any sense whatsoever, did it? It just was so far removed from each other.
Yeah. And obviously Paul Bearer came in there at one point. I don't know if you've seen that there's a Paul Bearer documentary just come on the WWE Network. I just started watching it last night.
Yes, yeah, so
10 or so minutes. Interestingly, a mortician in real life, isn't he? Or wasn't he?
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's where Vince got the idea. I think he was managing down.
Fancy being called Paul Bearer and actually being a mortician.
Yeah, what are the chances of that? Yeah, wow. I didn't get the Paul Bearer name for a number of years because I didn't know what Paul was. I'd not heard that before. I think literally at some point many years after I'd seen the Undertaker and Paul Bearer, I heard someone referred to as a funeral as a Paul Bearer. And I was like, right, that makes sense.
No, I had the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I was asked to be a pallbearer. So as a young adult, I was asked to be a pallbearer.
You painted your face white. You started going, woo!
I'm kind of like, what? And there's Paul Bearer, and then it was explained to me, and then I made the connection. I just always thought it was his name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, from having watched the documentary, the guy that played Paul Bearer, had been managing down in Dallas as Percy Pringle III and was considering leaving the business because there wasn't much going on down there. When Rick Rude, who he's good friends with, said, give Vince a call, spoke to Vince. Vince realised that he was a mortician in real life and thought, that's a perfect fit. Oh, that's nasty. So Michaels has just missed the moonsault off the top. Moonsault to the floor, Taker steps out of the way and sort of pushes him to one side. That is a nasty, nasty landing there. But speaking of nasty landings, there's another worse one coming up. Do you know what happens in a minute? Taker goes for a tope. I think it's going to happen in about 30 seconds time. Michaels pushes the referee out of the way, pulls a cameraman into the way, but Taker kind of half misses. The timing isn't quite right, and he lands on his head fairly heavily from having dived over the top rope. You'll see shortly.
Cameramen get a lot of abuse when Shawn Michaels is around.
Oh, yeah, I remember him battering some which one? Oh, it was the WrestleMania against Diesel, WrestleMania 9 in the main event. He like proper battered one, and I just assumed it was a part of the storyline, but I think actually it just got in his way.
The same as with Cell match with Taker. It just kept launching into the
Right, here we go. Watch out now. Taker's going to go. He's going to bounce off the ropes. He's going for the tope. I'll tell you in a second who the cameraman is that's about to take it. There we go. He's going for the tope. Michaels moves straight on his head. Look at that dent in the canvas there. No, the canvas, the ringside mats. That dent was caused by Taker's head. Jesus. So the cameraman is Sim Snooker. At the time, shortly after this, Randy Orton set up a stable called Legacy, which was sort of second, third generation superstars. It involved him, Cody Rhodes, and Ted DiBiase Jr. were the main three. It did briefly include Sim Snooker, who I think is Jimmy's either son or nephew or something like that. And Manu, who is yet another one of the Anwar family. Yeah, rejects in this case. He was a bit crap, to be honest. They soon dropped them and kept the three of DiBiase, Rhodes, and Orton. But this is Sim Snooker, the cameraman there, about to miss. Oh, and be landed on.
So assuming he's not actually a cameraman, then he's just there to take that move.
Yeah, just an extra. Yeah, that's okay. So the next time that Michaels and Undertaker wrestled each other after the Royal Rumble in 2007 was Cena and Michaels teamed up to defeat Batista and Undertaker the following month. And then the following month again, Batista and Undertaker defeated Cena and Michaels. Then you fast forward to Royal Rumble 2008, they face off again. And then after that, the next time they're in the same matches is this one. So over the years, you've got the three matches in 97, 98. You've then got this one and the one the following year at WrestleMania 26. So you've got 5 big matches. And other than that, there's not all that much there.
Mm.
And of course, let's not forget the all-time classic from Crown Jewel 2008. D-Generation X, Shawn Michaels and Triple H defeat the Brothers of Destruction, Kane and Undertaker. Have you seen that?
No, but the tone of your voice suggests it's crap.
It's absolutely rotten. It's one of the worst matches.
And Undertaker just don't get on, do they?
So Michaels famously was one of very few wrestlers not to come out of retirement, to do retirement properly, and never come out of it. But he came back for one match, what's that, about 2 years ago now. Supposedly because they kind of said he couldn't say no and they talked him into it. But I think it was mainly because he got paid something like $2 or $3 million for one night's work. Something to do with it. And my understanding is, from having seen stuff afterwards, is the 4 of them, so Kane, Triple H, Undertaker and Michaels, kind of just assumed it was all a formality, that it'd go well. 4 old hands who'd been in there a lot, had some classic matches over the years. And it all just fell apart. So Triple H tears his pec. Kane's mask falls off. Michaels falls over or falls off the ropes at one point. If you want to, I'll tell you what the best thing, if you Google it, you'll find it on YouTube quite easily. There's a little pastiche of it set to the 1 Foot in the Grave music.
I'll do that after it. No.
Right, so Taker's made it back in after landing heavily on his head. He's back in the ring.
So Shawn Michaels spent a lot of his childhood in England.
Is that because his dad was in the Navy or the RAF or whatever the equivalent is over there?
Yeah, he was in the military. What I've got here. Yeah, they moved to lived in Reading for quite a while.
Yeah, cool.
Just
having a quick look at their Wikipedia pages. Michaels and Undertaker are only born a couple of months apart. So Michaels born July the 22nd, 1965. Undertaker born 3 months earlier, March the 24th, 1965.
You wouldn't think that though, would you, looking at them here?
No. Michaels looked young for a long time and then aged nearly overnight.
Yeah.
Whereas Taker always looked old, and probably until only a few years ago, he looked a similar age, didn't he?
Yeah.
The last few years, I think, have definitely caught up with Taker, though. He's definitely aged.
Yeah, you can see it now. Yeah. But,
so what would it be there? This is 10 years ago, so he's about 45 there. Probably looks about 45, but probably looked about 40 when he debuted, didn't he?
That's accurate, yeah.
That's amazing to think at something like, say, Royal Rumble 94, you've got Undertaker and Yokozuna in a casket match. At that point, they're both 28 years old. Both looked about 40, as I thought.
Yeah, Yokozuna's another one, obviously, who's a lot older than he was.
Oh, super kick by Michaels, both down. You know what Michaels' finisher was before the super kick?
Oh, God, I should do. No, go on.
It was a teardrop suplex. It's not dissimilar to the angle slam. He'd get his head under their arm, a bit like Angle does with angle slam. If I remember correctly, he'd have one hand going through the legs from behind and the other hand hooking it. So he'd got them underneath between the legs and then take him over in something very similar to an angle slam, basically.
Well, kind of like a diagonal perfect plex type thing.
Yeah, kind
Did
of.
he pin them still while it's holding on, or?
No, I think he let go. I think he just hit it and pinned them. He also had a nice pile driver. I remember using the pile driver quite a lot in sort of 92, 93-ish. Sometimes as a finisher on jobbers, perhaps. Take it down. I think you're in trouble now, Shawn. Reached up and got him. The following year at WrestleMania, these two had a rematch, and I went to watch it. I was actually there.
Wow.
Phoenix, Arizona. Amazingly, it's the University of Phoenix's football stadium. It was an 85,000 seater.
Oh my God.
Imagine that. Imagine going to like Manchester University to watch the Manchester University football team and them having a stadium the same size as Old Trafford. Huge last ride power bomb from Taker there.
Did you go specifically for that, or?
But yeah, essentially, it was my 30th birthday present from my first wife. She said we were going away. I think I knew we were going to America, and I think I assumed by where we were flying into that we might be going to WrestleMania because I'd said I was looking forward to it and what have you. So we flew into Salt Lake City and drove down through 7 different national parks on the way, and ended up in Phoenix on the last night for WrestleMania 26.
Wow.
That was streak versus career. The only reason that Taker agreed to a rematch, having beat him in the one we're watching now, is if Michaels would put his career on the line. And it was generally known as well that that was the intent, that Michaels wanted to retire and this was his way of going out.
So I don't know how true this is, because we know how much Hogan likes to elaborate on sport.
Okay.
Hogan claims sort of kudos for Taker's signing to WWE.
I think there's an element of truth there. Wasn't Taker an extra in Suburban Commando?
Well, this is what always confused me, because he was in Suburban Commando. He was one of the 2 bad guys. But it was always confusing for me because I saw Suburban Commando when it was released in the UK, but I already knew Undertaker as a wrestler.
Yeah, I presume. I think there's an element of truth. So I'm guessing, was that filmed in, let's say, early 90?
Yeah, it must have been.
Hogan may have mentioned it, but I think they were possibly looking at him anyway. So I don't know if it's how much credit.
I think he'd had a bad run. He'd been in WCW, hadn't he, and not really made it.
I think he'd done an amount. I think, he'd wrestled Luger for the US title in one of the pay-per-views. So it's not like, and he'd been part of the Skyscrapers tag team as well with, I think it was Dan Spivey, I think, was it?
What was that? Was that as me, Mark Hollis?
Yeah. So the original Skyscrapers tag team was Dan Spivey and Sid, believe it or not. And then when Sid went down with a punctured lung, he was replaced by The Undertaker. So fast forward 7 years, the main event of WrestleMania 13 is Sid versus The Undertaker, the two Skyscrapers versus each other, funnily enough.
So that was a good tombstone there. You see some bad tombstones.
Taker's always had a pretty good tombstone. Kane's tombstone has never done anything for me. It's shit.
It's just awful. I blame the cameraman sometimes, or whoever's backstage choosing what camera to use. Because sometimes the head's so far up, you can see that nothing's happening. So when was Carl driving Outlaws?
I want to say around the time of like Benoit going nuts and all that, when they realised like concussions and all those things. I think probably around then they stopped it, with the odd exception of Taker's tombstone and so on. But going back to Kane's pile driver,
so loud.
Yeah, I think it's a special occasions thing. I think at that point he wasn't necessarily using it all that much because he'd replaced it with the Last Ride Powerbomb that we saw a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
During his American Badass period from 2000 to 2004. And I think he'd mainly replaced it to save his knees. He wanted to finish where he didn't need to leave his feet. Don't we all? But yeah, Kane's tombstone to me has always been a bit crap, to be honest. He sort of like, it almost looks like he's tripping into it a little bit, doesn't he? He doesn't do the whole up on double tiptoes and then down flat on the knees. He's like, he almost hobbles into it. That's Kane, who, despite wrestling the majority of his career in a mask, recently voted not to. Oh, sloppy DDT reversal there. Do you know Kane in his?
Did you say sloppy?
That DDT reversal was crap.
So I suppose that's where you're.
Yeah, just wasn't in the right place and just slipped off him. Taker goes to a tombstone there. Yeah.
He's reversed it into a DDT. I thought awesome.
Well, he has, but the problem was he was too far round, so Taker just went shoulder first into his body. His head was nowhere near the canvas. If Michaels had gone a few degrees less and been to Taker's left side, if you know what I mean,
yeah,
landing flat on a DDT rather than landing on top of him. I mean, I'm not saying I could do any better. I'm just saying it's perhaps one of the very few parts of this match that isn't absolutely perfect. And the majority of the rest of it just goes absolutely spot on, and that was a little bit off. So I was saying before, Kane, in his day job as mayor of Knoxville County, voted against use of masks as part of the COVID prevention. The rest of them voted for. The one mask wearer in the room voted against.
Yeah, irony. One of the betting houses, Paddy Power, they were using Kane.
Something like that, favours.
Their memes regarding wearing masks, saying Kane wore a mask for however many minutes in the Royal Rumble of whatever year.
I think I saw you share that, yeah. You can do it for 5 minutes in Tesco or whatever it was. I wouldn't like to wrestle in a mask. It must be hard.
Yeah.
Especially big ones like that. I mean, any like Rey Mysterio's is probably pretty bad, but Kane's was very big, thick thing that really kind of struggled in that. Tuning up the band now for Sweet Chin Music. First time I heard it referred to as Sweet Chin Music was after they mentioned a minute ago main event of WrestleMania 11 against Diesel. I remember he super kicked Diesel. Diesel went down. Sid was messing about with the referee on the outside, and then in the interview afterwards, Michaels pointed out they'd hit Diesel with a Sweet Chin Music. I think that's the first time he used that phrase. Possibly, and then maybe just thought that sounds cool, or maybe it was always the intent then to use it. I don't know if you know, a couple of years after that, in 1997, Mankind, Mick Foley, in part of his Three Faces of Foley period, where he'd wrestle as Mankind, Cactus Jack, and Dude Love.
Yeah.
His finisher, because he'd always thought he was going to be a wrestler like a Shawn Michaels. His finisher was the sweet shin music. He'd kick them in the shin, and as they bent over, he'd give the double arm DDT.
So Undertaker was upset when Mick Foley changed to Dude Love. You know about that? Yeah, because Undertaker had done a lot of work to get over. He twisted the Mankind character. And then he hated it when that became a sort of a comedy switch to Dude Love. He said he felt like he wasted a lot of time and work.
I thought it worked quite well. I think it's the sort of thing that could have failed horribly. I thought it worked all right. To say he was moving between three quite dissimilar, one particularly dissimilar characters, I felt they made it work.
I can sort of see it from Taker's point of view. They've done a lot of work putting him over and what have you.
Yeah. We're exchanging some vigorous blows there, back and forth. What's your favourite Shawn Michaels outfit? I'd never quite liked him as much in these chap style trousers. I always preferred him in the tights, with the broken hearts on from say the mid-90s.
Yeah, the early immediate post rockers. Yeah.
That's going to be one of the best heel turns ever, isn't it? Michaels throwing Jannetty through the barbershop window.
Nodding encouragingly in the background about Shawn Michaels' early outfits.
Say that last bit again.
We've talked about Shawn Michaels and his broken tights. Emma's in the background, my wife.
All right, okay, what's she saying?
Nodding
along. She knows, she remembers that.
You're a Shawn Michaels fan. And funnily enough, her dad looks like the Undertaker.
Really? Oh, that is funny.
Must be weird for her.
That is confusing, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, Taker charging in, taking the boot from Michaels. I think where we're up to in the match, can't have all that long left, I don't think.
Yeah, well,
presumably Taker's got to have by far the record for someone with the same character and in the same promotion. I can't think of anything that comes even anywhere near that.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, to be anywhere near 30 years, you're probably talking WWE, because unless you're counting NWA and WCW all as one, because WCW was only a thing for 13 years.
I mean, he had that era where he was the biker.
Yeah, American Badass, yeah.
That was a bit odd, wasn't it?
It was a little bit, but I think he'd been reinventing himself a little bit over the previous few years and perhaps felt it was time for something a bit. Yeah. Oh, there we go. It's over. I thought it must be coming to finish.
Well, he always, I don't know if this is still true, but I remember that he'd always refused to appear at a Hall of Fame ceremony.
Taker?
Because
refused to be inducted, you mean, or refused to appear as a...
Appear because it would mean breaking character to accept an award, or...
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. Up until this year, really, he's never done anything that's broken character, has he? He's always maintained it to a fair degree. Yeah, cool. That match is over. Cracking match, that.
Brilliant match.
17-0, rest in peace, as that sign shows there. Do you know, speaking of the streak, do you know where it nearly ended? It nearly ended very early on at what would have been, I want to say, 4-1. He was supposed to lose to Diesel at WrestleMania 12, the same night that Michaels beat Bret Hart for his first world title, until Diesel handed his notice in to go and leave for WCW. But the original intent had been for Diesel to go over, at which point Taker would have beat Jake Roberts in 92, Jimmy Snuka in 91, 93, Gonzalez, he won by disqualification. He didn't do 94. King Kong Bundy he beat at 95, so it would have ended up being a 4-1, losing to Diesel in 96. Speaking of Diesel and
late nights, they started getting main events. I think his first few were all kind of mid-card, weren't they?
Yeah. Speaking of the Diesel and Undertaker feud, one question I've always had about that, and I actually saw this recently in one of the Undertaker documentaries, is during the build-up to their feud, WrestleMania 12, 1996, a casket is wheeled out to ringside, and Diesel opens it to find Diesel in the casket. Yeah, and I assume it's like a waxwork, but it looks like it's actually him. It's freakishly realistic. Like sometimes I have these things where clearly not an actual person. It actually looks like Diesel is asleep. And if it wasn't for the fact that Diesel was there looking at it, I would have assumed that it was some sort of pre-record or they'd done some sort of trickery. But they're both in the same shot at the same time. Okay, Taker makes it 17-1. So, sorry, 17-1, 17-0. Oh. They say O in America, don't they? It's not 17-0, it's 17-0. And O as well. It's not just 17-0, 17-0. Right, let's have a look what we've got for next week then. So we were thinking alternate between title and non-title matches. So we're looking at a title. We've got Intercontinental title match, Ricky Steamboat, Randy Savage from WrestleMania 3. We've got 2 world title matches to get in, which is the Punk Cena match from 2011 and Batista Triple H from 2005. We probably need to separate those 2 title matches. So possibly one of them next.
I think I suggested having Cena and Punk as the final match anyway. I think you agreed at the time.
Yeah, I think so. So we're possibly talking World Heavyweight title, Batista and Triple H. Now we've got down WrestleMania 21, which is where Triple H is defending against Batista. If I remember correctly, their Vengeance match a couple of months later, the third of the 3 they had, was considered the best. But I have a feeling, I think that's in Hell in a Cell. I think that's why we didn't include that one.
Right.
So let's stick to WrestleMania 21, World Heavyweight title match, Triple H with Ric Flair in his corner defending against Batista.
Perfect.
Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed listening to that. Again, as always, share it on Facebook. I am going to set a Twitter account up at some point. Let people know if you find it interesting. I know that listening figures are going down slightly week on week, but there are people listening every week, I'm assuming, because there's an amount of that audience staying week on week. So it'd be nice to actually hear from them if you want to comment on something and let us know how you're getting on.